Welcome to Virtual Open Mic Interviews. I'm Bill, your host and founder of Virtual Open Mics. With me today is Veena from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Veena.
Hey, Bill. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
To start things off, let's sample a few of Veena's Virtual Open Mic submissions.
You wake up and find yourself all alone in the midst of the desert. Where do you go? Caution the winds, 'cause they might mislead, clouding your vision to finding your key. But no one to stop you from taking the steps. You're all by yourself, but it is for the best. No one to tell you where to go next. Take the first step and you'll figure the rest. But when will I give myself a chance? I don't want to spend my life without a plan. And when will I learn to chase my dreams and not doubt myself no matter how it seems? The more I ran, the more you started to blur before my eyes, until you started fading away to nowhere, fading to nowhere. Every time, every story has its scars. Someone trying to break your heart. My mind is drifting off too far. Are we nothing but specks of dust in this world? Tiny pieces could crumble anytime. Are we nothing but building blocks or puzzles? Just waiting for someone to put it all in place. And how do I find my way?
You can find a list of Veena's submissions to past virtual open mic events in the description for this video. So, Veena, do you think of your songs as individual, standalone pieces, or as a larger concept pursuing a grander story arc?
I'd love for my music to be able to take on both forms. That's the beauty of music, isn't it? It can take on all these different forms. Some songs are meant to catch you in a fleeting moment, just when you need it, while others are meant to take you on this longer journey over time. I do plan on writing an album or multiple albums eventually, and to me the goal of an album is to be able to connect tunes seamlessly, like chapters in a book that join together to form a larger story. When I think of albums I like as a whole, I think of artists like Radiohead, Pink Floyd, Bjork, because their albums flow so well together and they are so cohesive. I've also been listening to more classical music lately and I feel exactly the same way about them. That's what I want to do with my albums. I want to be able to create this soundscape that you can just immerse yourself into for an hour or so.
We're going to take some questions now from some other virtual open mic participants. So here is Laszlo from Debrecen, Hungary.
Hey Veena, I really love the personal thoughts in your songs. And my questions would be around those, especially that all of the media was self-expressing. Why and how did you choose songwriting? And which was the first song you have ever written? Thank you.
Hey Laszlo, nice to see you here. Firstly, thank you for asking me this question. I love it. So, why did I choose songwriting? I would actually say it's not my only choice. I appreciate all forms of art and self expression and have been involved with different things at various points of my life. I like to draw and paint every now and then. I design, and I've always enjoyed writing and poetry. However, songwriting has been the dominant one, and I guess it's because it's what I'm best at, so it plays to my strengths. I've been singing for a long time, since a very young age, and I've also always been told that I have a good ear. However, there's a lot more that I like to songwriting than just that. Songwriting brings together words and it brings together words and music, two standalone forms of self expression, but the combination turns it into something more powerful, just the way they blend together and connect. That being said, I love composing instrumentals too, because music can just speak for itself sometimes. It can convey a mood or an emotion, even without words. It's quite powerful. So that's what I like about songwriting. But really, I think all these different mediums are meant to work together to form a bigger picture. For instance, music can transport me somewhere visually. Sometimes a certain piece of imagery enters my mind and then I feel like writing a song about it. So it's quite interactive, and ideally I'd love to master it all. Now, to answer the question about how I wrote my first song, well, I used to sing a lot, so I always had it in the back of my head to write songs one day, but it felt like a faraway dream for a long time. It actually started because I had a friend who'd post tracks he wrote on a guitar onto a singing app, and he had this really beautiful way of combining guitar tracks and adding different sounds to them and layering them. I found it very inspiring. So one day I felt inspired and I wrote lyrics to one of his pieces. It was just a simple freestyle, but that was what eventually set me out on the journey to write full songs. I then started learning the guitar at one point, and since then I never looked back.
I want to follow up to that question about choosing music as an outlet. Playing music generally requires a performance, either live in front of an audience, releasing a recording, or presenting a video as we do here at virtual open mics. Now, you have described yourself to me as a private and somewhat introverted person. So how do you prepare yourself for a performance? What do you do to psych yourself up before revealing yourself and putting your work up for the judgment of others?
It's pretty interesting because I've been learning Indian classical music since I was little, and I was used to performing on stage since back then. If anything, I felt a lot less self-conscious performing as a kid when compared to now. But I do think that having that practice has helped me get more comfortable with the idea of performance, even though I'm a quite introverted person. That said, I still do get nervous before I perform, and often I find that the longer I have to wait before I start performing, the more nervous I am, whereas once I actually start singing, I get into the zone and it starts to get more natural. Also, when I started writing my own songs, it was different again. There was a point where I didn't feel that comfortable sharing my songs because I was new to songwriting and I wasn't sure if my songs were any good. With that, I guess my confidence just built over time and I started to develop a taste for my own songs. Also, I got a lot of good feedback, even from members in this group who I admire so much, and that has been a huge step into building that confidence.
Speaking for myself, I'm grateful that you've opened yourself up to sharing. I very much enjoy your songs. And based on the reception to your virtual open mic submissions, I feel confident in saying that you've made a positive impression on several others as well. All right, now we have Paul Wolfe from Fairfax, Virginia.
Hey Veena, Paul Wolfe here, and glad I get to ask a question. and participate in this interview. What I want to say is I love how you've brought some Indian music influences to bear on some of the music that you've made. I think of your song, The Way, and your cover of Heart-Shaped Box. My understanding is that Indian music doesn't just have a different sound, but it's deeper than that, has a different underlying musical structure. Is that true? And if it is, does that make it challenging to blend Eastern and Western styles of music? So I'm interested in that. And I'm also curious if your lyrics have been influenced by themes in Indian music and poetry. So I'm curious both about the musical side and the lyrical side. So thanks.
Hey Paul, thanks for your question. I have to say I'm a fan of your music. You've been putting out a lot of great stuff on the virtual open mics, and I'm glad I discovered them. I've actually taken a lot of inspiration from the way you express yourself, the way you write lyrics, and even the way you fingerstyle on the guitar. Also, I'm glad that you've asked this question because I was hoping someone would ask it. I have a lot to say to it. Indian music can feel like a whole different world, and yet it's all the same notes that make up music, the same frequencies. Indian music has a ton of scales, which we call ragams. In fact, there's every mathematical combination of notes that are possible. So there's ragams in 5, 6, and 7 notes with all its sharp and flat variations. Some of these scales overlap with Western scales, but the way they're sung are quite different. It would be quite hard to explain in words, so I actually thought I would demonstrate it over here just so that you get an idea. So I'm going to take the major scale, the Indian version of the major scale, which we call Shankarabharanam, and sing it along with the Indian notation. So here's what it would go like. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. So as you can see, there's a lot of variation in the way the notes are put together, and that is in fact what makes up the ragam. It's more than the notes itself, it's the relationship between them. In fact, I've heard of instances where the notes of two different ragams are exactly the same, but they're called different things purely because of the way the notes are sung. You might have also noticed that Indian notation of music is quite different. Similar to how language works, when I look at notes on a keyboard or a guitar, I tend to think of them as Indian notes because that's what I grew up with. Also, when I look at any notation, I tend to convert it into Indian notes in my head. Apart from all of this, Indian music also has a variety of rhythms. So, as you might know, 4x4 is by far the most common rhythm pattern in Western music, but in Indian music, it's just one of many. There's nothing unusual about 5x4 or 7x4 or something more complex. It's just another time signature. So coming to your question about how do I combine these styles of music, one foolproof way of making a song sound more Indian, which in fact I've done in both of the songs that you mentioned, is to add a tambura. This is an instrument that basically sounds similar to a sitar, but for some context, the purpose is to actually hold the root note while you practice, so it helps you stay in pitch. In some aspects, it's been quite challenging trying to combine these two styles of music, but it's been a fun challenge. Indian music traditionally doesn't really use chord progressions like Western music does, but I've been learning a lot about music theory lately, and I'm starting to see connections between the two. So there are, in fact, Indian scales that would fit into certain chord progressions, perhaps in place of its Western equivalent scale. So it's been quite interesting to learn about. Lyrically, there probably hasn't been as much of an influence for me. However, every Indian scale has its own mood and its own vibe, and that tends to inspire different sort of lyrics out of me. For instance, in the song The Way, the chord progression along with the Indian scale I used gave it a very philosophical and existential feel, and that is reflected in the lyrics.
I certainly hear the fusion of what I perceive as Indian music or scales in the general Western music approach of your songs. So I'm going to play a little bit of your song Forever from Virtual Open Mic number 12. Listen carefully for the Indian music influence in the vocal line.
Break your heart. My mind is drifting off too far.
Okay, so right there at My Mind is Drifting Off Too Far, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And it struck me as something that another singer, one who has not had training in Indian music, might not have readily available in their musical lexicon.
All I knew was Indian music at the start. I was a kid and it's what I was taught. So I didn't actually have much exposure, almost none, to Western music back when I was very young. Although there were some exceptions because actually I lived in the US during my early childhood years until I was 6. I mean, it's hard not to get exposed to certain songs like the Macarena, for instance, and Barbie Girl, which was actually like my childhood jam. But anyway, the point is those songs were everywhere. Apart from that, I only really got into Western music when I was in high school. It actually started out with Michael Jackson because that was the year of his death and he was in the news everywhere. So that's how I started listening to him. I ended up becoming a big fan of his and pretty much listened to his entire discography before I moved on to any other artist. Later, I started listening to a lot of the mainstream pop that my friends would listen to. So artists like Taylor Swift and One Direction came out at that time. And I didn't really venture much beyond that for a while. But eventually, I got into this exploratory phase where I just wanted to listen to a lot of different things. And that's how I found a lot of the genres: rock, metal, jazz, and electronic music. I just started to try out everything and see what stuck.
Here we have a forward-looking question from Lamont Cranston.
Hi, Veena. My question for you is, what would you like to do with your music in the future?
Hey Lamont, thanks for the question. Just wanted to say that I love the songs you've been putting out for these virtual open mics so far, and I like your style. Also, thank you for all the feedback that you've been giving me on my music. I appreciate it. Now, to answer your question of what I'd like to do with my music, definitely a lot. As mentioned before, I would love to write albums. I do have an idea for one, and it's currently a work in progress. It is quite a metaphorical story, and actually a couple of the songs that I've played in these virtual open mics will be in it. I won't tell you which ones just yet, but feel free to take a guess. The idea is to play around with different styles, but also have it be able to flow from one song to the next cohesively. And I guess that's my aim with music in general. I just want to keep trying out a lot of different things. One of the things I want to do is to be able to play lead guitar better, mainly so that I can start playing Indian scales on the guitar and be able to get the ideas that are in my head out onto paper. But lately, I've actually gained a lot of appreciation for the piano, so that is an instrument that I'd love to get better at too. Another thing that interests me is music production, because I think learning it would expand a lot of possibilities. I want to learn about synthesizers and understand how to carve your own sounds. And if I really took to that electronic side of things, maybe I could potentially learn to live loop someday. It's really fun watching others perform stuff like that, so it would be cool if I could do the same someday. I also want to learn music theory because you need to be able to know the rules in order to break them. And also, it's really fun analyzing songs and seeing what makes them work. So, definitely a lot on my list, but mainly I just want to have fun doing it all. It's been a great journey so far with the singing, the songwriting, and learning to play the guitar and the keys. And it's something I just want to keep going.
Hey Veena, Kevin White here from Houston. As a singer-songwriter, I write a lot of songs that I want that I write for a full band, and certain songs I write as a singer-songwriter. So, out of all the songs that you've written and performed as a singer-songwriter, is there something that one song in particular that you do, but when you're playing it, you're thinking, I want this instrument here, and I want it to be more rhythmic and stuff like that. So really enjoy your work and stay safe.
Hey Kevin, great question, and I've loved following you along on these virtual open mics. You have some great material. To answer your question, I'd actually start by saying that many of my songs can be fleshed out or have already been into larger arrangements. In fact, a lot of these songs started out as more elaborate arrangements and then turned into acoustic guitar performances that I've been doing here. So among the songs that I played, a few like The Desert, Into the Sky, and Fading to Nowhere actually started out on the piano, and two of them remain piano-based songs with a few more elements to it, while another turned into something with more synth sounds. Arranging songs is actually a big part of the fun for me, seeing what can come out of them beyond just the guitar or the piano. I love trying out different sound combinations and seeing what works well and what can make the song sound more unique. Currently, GarageBand has been helping me do this really well because it has this really extensive synthesizer which allows me to basically replicate almost any instrument sound. So it's really helped me go for the sound that I'm looking for. I would say that there is one song though that I haven't managed to flesh out the way I hear it in my head, and that is Just a Fantasy, which I've also played on a virtual open mic. It's a pretty simple chord progression. It's repetitive, but it's also catchy. And I think having some really good lead guitar licks along with drums and bass would help take it to the next level. So this is something that I hope to do sometime successfully once I get better with my lead guitar, or it would be great to also get help from any one of you in this group.
Okay, Veena, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
It's been a lot of fun answering these great questions, so thanks for the opportunity.
I hope you all have enjoyed this interview with Veena. Check the description for links to past virtual open mic events with Veena, as well as a link to her Bandcamp page. Once again, I'm Bill saying thank you, and see you soon at the mic.